Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Battletoads, brought to us by Rare. While Battletoads was released on the Amiga as well as the Sega Genesis, the NES version seems to be the one most people remember. One of the things they'll also always remember is how difficult Battletoads is to play. And even though the game is very difficult, it's one of those ones you kept wanting to pick up and play, and just try and try again, and try to get a little bit farther every time you did. Battletoads is also one of those games that you brought out the Game Genie to try to help you and play through the game. However, even with some of the Game Genie codes, you wouldn't be able to complete the game without a lot of skill. So here we go with Battletoads for the NES. In Battletoads, as you can see from the opening, there's three main characters: Rash, Zitz, and Pimple. There's also Princess Angelica. Now, Pimple and Princess Angelica have been taken by the Dark Queen to another planet, so it's up to Rash and Zitz to battle through the Dark Queen's army and save Pimple and Princess Angelica. So you can play Battletoads either single player or two players. However, the game can actually be more difficult playing it in two-player mode. The first level of the game starts off pretty basic. You have your attack with just your main button, as well as you have a jump button. You can double tap either the left or right button in order to do a dash attack into enemies. By doing so, you'll usually do double the damage and taking out a lot of enemies in only one dash. These enemies here, were able to destroy them, pick up one of their legs, and use it as a weapon to take out other enemies. Here for the first time we see some flies. Just like a normal frog or toad, you'll actually be able to eat the flies for nourishment, so it ends up giving you health depending upon how many flies you eat up. So heating up one fly will grant you 1 square of health back. Right next to that, we're able to ride on the back of a dragon. When you knock him down from the sky, you can actually ride on his back. This ends up being the only level, unfortunately, that we're able to do this. And here we have the first boss battle of the game, this giant ship. It fires using its turret guns at you several times and then throws a ball down at you. You can pick up the ball and launch it at the ship. It's going to take 3 to defeat it. Just be careful that you're not in the way of the fire of the guns, so you don't end up getting hurt by them. Once it's done, the pieces fall from the sky as you've destroyed it, and you jump into the pit at the end of the road. The second level of the game, Wookiee Hole, is a little bit more challenging and has some different gameplay. You're now actually holding onto a rope and being lowered throughout this giant hole. You have a normal kick attack, and when you actually move against one of the walls, either left or right wall, and hold it for a few seconds, you end up turning into a giant iron weight, and you can use that to take out most of the enemies throughout this hole in one hit. These large birds, when you hit them, will actually drop a sword. You have to be quick to hit them though, because if they're actually able to make contact with your rope, they instantly snap it and you'll instantly lose a life. Also there, you're actually able to see that I can bounce the bird several times off the wall, increasing my score every time I do. If you're able to get the score high enough, you get an extra life, and you're going to need all the extra lives you can possibly get to make it through this game. These large robots that bust out of the walls, take them out with one of the big swing shots with the giant iron weight. After a couple more birds, you now have these electrical beams that are going to start coming out of the walls from one direction to the other. They always come from the same direction every time you play, but if it's your first time playing, you're really not going to be sure what direction they're coming from, so just be ready to, as soon as you see them coming out, immediately try to get to the opposite side and move past them on the screen so you don't get electrified. It only takes 2 electrical shots to take out your full bar of health. Be careful of these Venus flytrap-like enemies on the walls, as they can grab you and end up flinging you across the stage and into the opposite wall, doing some decent damage. Thankfully though, throughout this level there's a decent amount of flies to pick up in order to increase your health back to full. At the end of the stage, there's some more of these electrical beams that are going to move a little bit faster. Thankfully though, they just alternate from left to right and then from right to left. Once you get past them though, you've completed the Wookiee Hole Stage 2. Stage 3 is the Turbo Tunnel. Now this is where the game starts to really get difficult. It starts off pretty normally, just like the first stage, where you're just attacking a few normal enemies. These rats you can punch or do a ram into, and then you'll have to do a couple of kicks while they're on the ground in order to fully take them out. After that, you have these Space Invader enemies that are going to show up and try to steal your health. They each grab a square of health and you're not able to destroy them, but if you're able to destroy them before they get off screen with the health, you're able to grab it, and it goes back into your health bar. You then have 2 series of pits that you have to jump over while taking out one enemy on each of the pits. After that begins the main portion of this stage. You're riding on a vehicle through a very fast, long pathway, watching out for walls as well as other perils. Now it starts off slow, you have some walls that will be alternating, you just move up and down along the screen in order to avoid them. It'll start to vary and try to trick you by having 2 at a time or different types, as well as you can have solid walls that you must jump over. You can jump over the singular walls as well as long as you time the jump correctly. After a certain amount you'll have a gate which signifies that it's a checkpoint. If you lose a life at any point after that checkpoint, you'll start back there. On the ramps, be sure just to run into them. Don't do a jump after you run into them, or it may cause you to end up not hitting the jump correctly and you'll end up falling into the giant gap. The only ramps that you're going to jump into are the ones that are actually floating up in the air. Getting good at this whole part comes down to memorization and very, very fast fingers. Another peril to deal with will be these rats that drive by and drop down sections of walls so that you have to jump over them. This is one of those ramps where you actually have to jump in order to hit the ramp at the right moment. After a few huge ramp jumps, You then have to avoid some other vehicles that are going to try to drive into you. After that, you're then going to have to actually do some manual jumping to get over some gaps, in which case after this, you'll hit a checkpoint, and here's where the really hard part comes. You have to have precise, exact timing in order to move this fast throughout. As you can see, it's almost literally impossible on your first time to get through that without getting hurt. You may have also noticed during that part that there was actually a sparkling thing. That was a level warp that would warp you ahead 2 levels. There's several of these throughout the game which I will be skipping so I can showcase all the levels in the game. However, as a kid, when I would finally get to the end of that turbo tunnel part, I always had a problem of end up running into that warp sometimes, even when I didn't want to. The next level is the Arctic Caverns. I start off by dashing quickly so I can avoid the icicles that start falling from the top. Once you jump over a short wall, you're going to have to take out a large block of ice. You can punch it so that it slows down, then you can pick it up in order to destroy another one of the brick walls right by it. Be sure to avoid it though when it's coming back down. Next up, you can get past a couple of snowmen throwing snowballs, and then when you get to the bottom, you start getting chased by a giant one of those ice blocks. Let it chase you or jump over it, and when it gets to the bottom, it'll destroy a wall so that you can get past. Here we have to be careful to get over the snowballs as they get larger and larger as they go down farther down the platforms. When you get to the top, attack the snowman, then fall away from him a little bit, and as soon as he reforms, deliver another hit. Those snowmen have the potential in one of their big moves in order to take you out with only one punch. During these areas, be very careful not to jump into the pink spikes because they are also an instant death. Over here, you can use the snowball, or you can use the large block of ice to take out the brick wall. Once that's done, wait a few seconds for the platform to come over before you attempt to jump over the spike pit. Here we basically have a dodge session as we have to jump over these walls while the snowman is firing snowballs at us. Right after one, you'll have another one, so be very careful when working your way over the walls so the snowballs don't hit you. Thankfully though, those snowballs don't do too much damage. Be very careful in this whole area because there's several floors of these spike objects moving back and forth. Once you get to the bottom, you'll have to deal with an ice block and throw it over a small wall so that it can keep bouncing to destroy a brick wall while avoiding one of the spike things as well. Up here we get some much needed health before jumping down avoiding those spikes. When you get over here, duck down and wait for the snowman to start firing snowballs. He'll throw 3 up and then 1 down, so you'll have to jump over the bottom one. Down this gap is actually where the exit is, but we can't go down there yet. Watch out for the spike as it moves back and forth, but when it hits the walls, that's your opportunity to go underneath the walls to get past. You can't actually jump over these walls. Get to the last platform, fall down, and be sure to jump off at the very end so that you can avoid falling into the spikes and you've completed the Arctic Cavern. Level 5 is another vehicle level as we have Surf City. In my opinion though, Surf City ends up being a little bit easier to deal with than the Turbo Tunnel. You start off by surfing around and you have these large logs in the water. Be sure to dodge in and out of the logs because they deal a lot of damage. Only 2 log shots can take out your whole health bar.